This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The number of confirmed coronavirus cases surpasses 2.2 million worldwide. We have the details on the latest efforts by African countries to combat the pandemic. Hello and welcome to Africa Live here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Welcome to the program. Let's see what else is coming up. In business, South Africa allows mines to operate at 50% capacity during its ongoing coronavirus lockdown. And in sports, an alleged power struggle throws the South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee into turmoil. Well, we begin with the latest figures on the COVID-19 pandemic. Worldwide confirmed cases have surpassed 2.2 million. Over 154,000 people have died. The U.S. has reported more than 34,000 cases over the past day. Total cases there surpass 706,000. That is about a third of the global total. More than 37,000 people have died in the country. Meanwhile, more than half of all cases are in Europe, with Spain and Italy the hardest hit. Iran, the epicenter in the Middle East, has registered more than 79,000 infections. The Chinese mainland reported 27 new cases on Friday, including 10 local transmissions and 17 cases imported from abroad. Well, here in Africa, more than 19,000 COVID-19 cases have been reported across the continent. The continent's death toll has surpassed the 1,000 mark. Only two African countries, Lesotho and Comoros, are without cases. Experts have warned the number will continue to rise. Ethiopia has confirmed 9 new COVID-19 cases, bringing the country's total to 105. Despite the rise, the World Health Organization has said containment is still possible. Dozens of countries on the continent have come up with different measures, including lockdowns, to help prevent the virus from spreading. Rwanda has extended its national lockdown, meanwhile, for another 21 days. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says a worrying trend of a faster rise in confirmed coronavirus cases on the continent is emerging. This amid concerns that countries are not testing as much as they should be. A report by the Economic Commission for Africa has painted a grim picture, estimating that COVID-19 could kill over 300,000 Africans. The current number of deaths has exceeded 1,000 recorded among approximately 1,800 infections reported on the continent.
But although we see encouraging signs in some countries, there are worrying trends in others. In the past week, there has been a 51% increase in the number of reported cases in my own continent, Africa, and a 60% increase in the number of reported deaths. With the current challenge of obtaining testing kits, it's likely that the real numbers are higher than reported.
Well, now, the Nigerian president's chief of staff, Abba Kyari, has died after contracting the coronavirus. Kyari was in his 70s and had underlying health problems, including diabetes. He was the top official aide to President Muhammadu Buhari and one of the most powerful men in the country. The presidency has condoled with the country as it mourns his death. Kyari's passing becomes the highest profile death due to the disease in the country. Nigeria has more than 400 cases and 17 deaths. Well, the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says that there is not enough coronavirus testing being carried out in the sub-Saharan region. The organization now plans to distribute 1 million COVID-19 testing kits to help countries address the shortfall. In Cameroon, the country is stepping up efforts to engage in door-to-door testing.
Doctors in Douala, the commercial capital of Cameroon, have been responding to house calls from residents experiencing symptoms of the coronavirus. They carry out tests from local homes and then spray their houses with disinfectant. On this day, they visited a mother of two.
Honestly, no, there are no real risks, and we are not really scared. On the contrary, I can say that this is what is motivating us. In fact,
another potential patient summoned the response team after he began feeling unwell. He says at this time, many people are afraid to come forward with their symptoms for fear of losing their jobs or being hospitalized. But attitudes are now changing as more citizens become concerned about their health.
You know, with a pandemic like this one, you will find that a lot of people don't have the courage to get themselves tested. I think that the strategy put in place by the Minister of Health is a good one.
Dr. Sandrine Mvebiwole is part of one of only 2 medical teams in the district of Bwanasama in Douala who checks on potential patients. Around 500,000 people live in the district, and she says the workload is too heavy for her and the staff.
The challenge is that we are working every day for long hours too. The workload is quite big, and we are working with a virus that is unknown. Sometimes we, the health workers, show symptoms of the virus ourselves. Sometimes we feel unwell. All this adds to the pressure.
Wearing of masks in the street and while using public transport is now compulsory in the country. However, with a shortage of surgical masks in pharmacies, NGOs are now stepping in to sew their own and distribute them for free. The government says it has also purchased 100 ventilators that are soon to be delivered. Chomhono, CGTN.
In Rwanda, the country is using drones to keep residents in the capital, Kigali, informed of lockdown measures. They are also using them to catch those violating the lockdown. The country has more than 140 confirmed cases with no deaths. But there are fears the pandemic could spread further in the country. Apart from the drones, the country is observing a lockdown as part of anti-pandemic measures. A host of other nations have deployed drones to publicize rules, check movements, and even spray disinfectant.
Checkpoints are static, and the drones are flying in areas where checkpoints are not mounted, and where possibly patrols could not be there. So basically, we have 2 drones. One will be actually spreading the message, another one will be taking pictures.
Meanwhile, Kenya has received a consignment of medical supplies from China. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar tells us more.
Kenya's health ministry had promised to embark on mass testing for coronavirus cases in a matter of weeks. With the arrival of this cargo aboard a Kenya Airways plane, the East African nation is now close to achieving this.
We have come to witness and confirm the arrival of this 787, which has been carrying medical supplies from China. I would also like to say Kenya Airways is ready in terms of any evacuations required. Kenya Airways is ready to make sure that we provide that facilitation.
The medical supplies include 500,000 masks, 200,000 testing tubes, shoe covers, and tens of thousands of N95 masks.
We were getting desperate for some of the items that are on this flight, and we are glad to see that the cooperation across all government agencies is what is going to help us in winning this war against this deadly epidemic. We are really grateful that Kenya Airways has been able to come on board and assist us to the extent that they have. We have developed protocols with them on how to travel, on how to quarantine themselves, the crew, when they come and when they go, they know what to do. So we are happy about what is happening.
The arrival of these supplies comes weeks after another consignment donated by Chinese businessman Jack Ma landed here. Meanwhile, the government is promising stringent enforcement of the ongoing curfew, which has already been in place for almost a month.
I want to confirm that we are doing everything we can to enforce the curfew, to enforce the guidelines that we have been given by the Ministry of Health, and we will step up what we need to do to ensure that we keep our people safe. We are stepping up preparations in the event And we keep praying to the Lord that we don't get there. Our plan with the county governments is working. County governments working with county commissioners have been asked to put aside isolation centers in the event that we need them. I now can confirm that we have been advised by our colleagues in the Ministry of Trade that we will have enough face masks in the country.
Kenya has over 200 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and it is hoped that mass testing will help the government accurately target its programs aimed at reducing the spread of the disease. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
Well, China has also donated medical supplies to South Sudan to help the country contain the coronavirus. With 4 confirmed cases of COVID-19, South Sudan's government is calling for more support and better equipment to tackle the crisis and effectively treat patients. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
The supplies from China contain protective suits, testing kits and face masks. It is the second batch of equipment to come from the Chinese government and companies in Beijing. Chinese medical teams have been sent to South Sudan to advise healthcare workers in Juba fighting the coronavirus. Beijing says defeating COVID-19 needs joint efforts.
And China is ready to extend our support, both our political support and our in-kind support, to South Sudan and other friendly African countries.
China has now donated more ventilators to South Sudan for patients with the worst effects of the coronavirus. Medical ventilators can offer the best chance of survival, but South Sudan only has 4 for a population of 11 million people.
South Sudan is facing challenges because we don't have enough ventilators. The 5 ventilators which arrive in this flight will make a difference in saving life in the Republic of South Sudan.
South Sudan's Ministry of Health says it wants to launch community testing for COVID-19 by next week. It says it is targeting 500 tests a week in the capital, Juba. However, it says it can't carry out them unless it receives more testing kits and funds to facilitate the work of health workers. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Well, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread, street children are among the most vulnerable to infection. In Senegal, this group lives in crowded boarding homes, and an ongoing curfew is making it difficult for them to obtain money or food. Senegal has more than 300 cases.
ñu bari dañuy daw ba tax na sax am na ay kër yeneen ak yeneen yu ñuy demee pour xewlu kër yooyu suñu ñëwee tamit duñu nangu kii dañuy daw soo indee sa pot sax dañ koy jël raxas ko ba pare yow yaa koy njëkk raxas ñoom ñu raxas ko def si microbe ba pare soog laa defal après nga dem.
Now, a recovered COVID-19 patient in South Africa has started an initiative called Ubuntu Beds to give free lodging to healthcare workers. Kim Whitaker was among the first 50 patients to be diagnosed with the illness on her return from Europe. She felt this was a good way to assist doctors and nurses working long hours. CGTN's Julie Shire now reports.
South African hotelier Kim Whitaker contracted a mild case of COVID-19 in Europe.
While in quarantine, she decided to use her own hotels, now standing empty, to accommodate medical staff working long hours in 2 of the worst-hit provinces.
In areas where the coronavirus is spiking, the healthcare workers are starting to reach out and say, I'd prefer to stay in a lodge or a guest house close to my hospital as opposed to commuting back and forth and going home to my loved ones. I have a hotel in Cape Town and one in Johannesburg called Once in Cape Town and Once in Joburg. And I thought, actually, this is how I can help. I can offer our rooms.
Medical intern Chisebe Limposa graduates in December. She's been thrust into the forefront of treating sick patients. Her grueling 12-hour shifts are likely to get longer as the need for intensive care grows.
It's not so easy to travel with public transport as it was before. And also being closer, it's less time on the road. My mom's a bit older. In terms of exposure and things like that, I thought it was just a little bit easier and more comfortable to stay quite closer to the hospital. In all honesty, I just really shower, eat. I'll maybe watch like half an episode of Netflix. But by the time the plot thickens, I'm probably quite passed out.
Whitaker is working with banking group RMB and other platforms to raise capital through ubuntubeds.org. She's appealed to individuals and other hotels to come on board.
So if you want to sponsor one night for a healthcare worker, or if you'd like to sponsor 1 week for a healthcare worker, you can go on and log on to the website and contribute. So whether it's an Airbnb apartment or you know someone who runs a guest house or B&B, register on the site, because the more accommodation places we have in our database, the closer we're going to be able to find places to the relevant hospitals when the need arises.
Every second counts for healthcare workers in the cold face of this pandemic. Being able to save precious hours will give them much needed rest and peace of mind to continue fighting on the front lines. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
To the United States now, a day after the White House laid out a roadmap to reopen parts of the economy, several states have announced plans to ease restrictions, while at least 16 others and Washington, D.C. have extended stay-at-home orders. The political divide comes as the U.S. death toll tops 37,000. CGTN White House correspondent Nathan King reports.
When the US president unveiled new guidelines for the opening of the economy and getting people back to work, he told the states they called the shots. But much of Friday, he was taking shots at governors. In a series of bizarre tweets, he wrote, "Liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia, and liberate Minnesota," seemingly to provoke demonstrations in those states against extended lockdowns to beat the pandemic. Trump also attacked New York Governor Andrew Cuomo for his requests for medical supplies. Cuomo, meanwhile, said the federal government needed to help implement widespread testing.
The federal government cannot wipe their hands of this and say, oh, the states are responsible for testing. We cannot do it.
This week, the US president has lashed out the World Health Organization and suspended its funding, lashed out at China by spreading unfounded theories, and repeatedly at the governors of US states. Whether his motive is to distract from the climbing death toll here in the US or to pump up his political base is unclear. One thing is clear, though, that the country, the United States, is divided politically during the COVID-19 pandemic than it was before. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
Well, the big question remains, is the United States ready to open up its economy just yet? Our next report takes a closer look at the preparation levels.
Protests on Thursday. An endorsement on Friday.
No, these are people expressing their views. I see where they are and I see the way they're working. They seem to be very responsible people to me.
US President Donald Trump backing protesters who flouted the stay-at-home orders in Michigan and Ohio and demanded an immediate reopening of the economy. The agitators say the restrictions are hurting them.
In the state of Michigan, we have between 3,500 and 5,000 people who can safely be released to the community.
The pressure is rising on state governors to open up quickly. So what exactly are some of the state's plans, and are they really battle ready? Let's find out. Texas, with almost 18,000 cases and over 450 deaths, has set up a task force to reopen the economy. Starting Friday, the state will allow all stores to open, permitting pickup and delivery, but no in-store shopping. Minnesota is allowing golf courses and driving ranges to open from Saturday morning. Meanwhile, Michigan is taking a cautious approach and planning to loosen the stay-at-home orders from May 1st. Ohio also intends to gradually open from the same day, but with physical distancing guidelines. Florida, which was one of the last states to issue stay-at-home orders, is already moving towards reopening. Jacksonville opened its parks and beaches on Friday for limited hours. The state has over 24,000 cases with 725 deaths. But medical experts say none of these states are addressing the elephant in the room, the lack of adequate testing to ensure a safe return. According to official figures, the US has conducted 3.7 million tests with about 120,000 tests per day. Though the testing capacity has increased, health experts say it's still not enough to understand the spread of the virus. But the US president has dismissed this.
False and misleading information about our testing capacity is totally false and misleading.
So here's the current scenario: a federal administration that is eager to open up, and state governors who may look to politics as much as to science when they make the ultimate call. The White House is sounding the comeback bugle, and it now seems the voices of concern are being drowned out.
To the UK now, where Britain's death toll from the coronavirus rose by over 840 on Friday, a slightly slower increase than the previous day, but still among the worst rates globally. Health and emergency services on the front line continue to prepare for even more cases. CGTN's Andrew Wilson with more.
They are applauded and applaud themselves in return. It's louder in the cities, but it happens everywhere as, just like in Europe, the people acknowledge their debt to health carers and emergency services. A first response helicopter speeds down the River Thames as blue light vehicles, police and firefighting line up to show their appreciation. In Whitehall, Foreign Secretary and Chancellor lead their clap for carers, which are echoed by the new Labour leader, who is starting to make his presence felt.
But whilst I support the extension of the lockdown, I do think the government needs to bring forward the exit strategy to tell us the principles on which things are going to change in a few weeks' time. They need to do that because they need the trust of the public.
In Vienna, where things are improving, the Austrian health minister briefs his public, dragging a finger across the latest infection figures. It's the UK that frightens people, he says. The numbers may show signs of starting to improve, but those two issues of limited testing and shortages of protective equipment continue to haunt this government. The Health Secretary was grilled by a parliamentary committee today.
Now that we've got the curve under control, I want to be able to get back to the position that we can test everybody with symptoms, and I anticipate being able to do that relatively soon because we're increasing capacity.
Across the country, the health service continues to prepare for more cases. The second Nightingale Emergency Hospital has been opened in Birmingham. 500 more beds, which can go up to 1,500 on demand. And even as another medical operation was launched, the first flights of Eastern European labourers touched down to start seasonal work on UK farms. Controversial during Brexit, not anymore. The UK has 3 more weeks now to produce more reassuring results as the lockdown eats into the national economy. But the public remains on board. As the sun goes down on the nation's capital, London's landmarks glow blue with support for the hospitals and staff on the coronavirus front line.
Well, it's time for a short break here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up on the program. Zimbabwe marks 40th independence anniversary amid coronavirus fears. And fighting the coronavirus, Cameroon starts televised classes following the closure of schools.
How will your world change today? What happens here? what happens there, or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. At least 23 people were killed and dozens of others injured on Friday by floods in the eastern DRC region of South Kivu. The floods affected the provincial capital of Uvira. Local authorities said the heavy rainfall began Thursday night and continued through Friday, causing floods that have destroyed over 200 houses. We're now joined by Chris Ochamringa, who is live in Kinshasa. Thank you for joining us, Chris. What more do we know about this tragedy and rescue efforts?
Well, search and rescue teams have been able to recover some children and adults who were caught up in these floods. They have also been able to retrieve 23 bodies. They are fearing that there could be very many more others who were killed in these floods that started on Thursday, continued on Friday. There was a lot of devastation. More than 200 houses have been destroyed. The local authorities there have been appealing to the central government to support them because very many people are grieving. The officials in Kinshasa haven't issued a statement yet, but what we know is that they are overstretched by the number of epidemics that they are grappling with in the country, the latest of which is COVID-19. The National Task Force has been requesting for funds to deal with this outbreak, but they haven't got enough. The World Bank and the US government has also supported them. Now the DRC has been facing floods right from last year. In November, there were more than 40 people who died of floods in Kinshasa and many others who died in the western part of the country. Scientists have been saying that this was caused by climate change, and the government is trying to put up measures to ensure that they protect people, but they are facing a lot of challenges in terms of different epidemics like Ebola, measles, cholera, polio, and now COVID-19. So it's a very difficult time for authorities here.
Chris Ochamringa, thank you very much for joining us there live. Moving on to Zimbabwe, today is the country's 40th independence anniversary. The day will, however, be low-key after national celebrations due to take place in the second city, Bulawayo, were cancelled as part of lockdown measures to contain COVID-19.
No pomp, ceremony or fanfare, but pretty much as you've been for the last 20 days, and that is under lockdown as Zimbabwe tries to keep the coronavirus at bay. But those movement restrictions have been difficult to enforce in some of the suburbs here that face challenges, including a lack of basic amenities and shortages of foodstuffs. Many I've spoken to here say while 40 is a milestone achievement, it is difficult to celebrate given the circumstances.
We are in queues for water, others for meals, so it does not really feel like there's anything to celebrate. We cannot really be happy because of COVID-19. We were used to taking our children to the national stadium so they can see the history of this country, but now we have to keep them indoors and they cannot celebrate.
40 years is a long time. It's a big achievement, so we should be happy. Even though there are challenges we are facing, we are at least happy we are alive, and that we have made it this far.
We are happy, and because we were born at independence, and people say life begins at 40, so for us it's worth celebrating.
Many here hope that Zimbabwe does get a new lease of life, that the future will bring an end to some of the challenges that have dogged this country for many years, and that the prosperity that was hard fought for and won in 1980 can start to be enjoyed by all. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Now, Cameroon has begun televised classes for school children forced to stay home as part of regulations to curb the spread of the coronavirus. The lessons are now being broadcast on national and regional platforms. The new program has been dubbed Digital School and allows teachers to film their classes from a private TV studio in Buea. Students, on the other hand, take notes at home. Most students in the English-speaking northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon have not had access to schools for almost 2 years. The government is fighting a separatist insurgency that has killed at least 2,000 people and forced 500,000 others to flee. For students like Catherine, accessible education is priceless.
Just because you watch the TV, you got the class, it motivates you, it inspires you to know more, to want to just search around for however you can.
On television, you are exposed to a larger audience, and there are people who will see you that you don't even know them, and leaving the television station, you don't know what can happen to you.
Well, it's time for the business news here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. South Africa allows mines to operate at 50% capacity during its ongoing coronavirus lockdown.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's begin the business in South Africa. The country will allow mines to operate at 50% capacity during its ongoing nationwide lockdown aimed at reducing the spread of the coronavirus. The government had ordered most underground mines to be put on care and maintenance during the lockdown. But miners have been lobbying the government to allow them to resume production with controls in place that will limit the spread of COVID-19. The amended regulations say mines will be allowed to restart and ramp up capacity depending on conditions, including the screening of employees for COVID-19 symptoms, the availability of quarantine facilities, and transport arrangements for workers. Still in South Africa, 22 independent wind energy producers are questioning the legality of a decision by Eskom to stop using wind power due to low demand caused by the national lockdown. Take a listen.
It really comes down to a precedent that is a danger of being set. Again, you know, these contracts are set in stone, and very big investment decisions have been made on the back of those contracts. If those contracts change, and you know, it's basically at the whim of one party to those contracts, and there's many parties. It's not just Eskom and the IPPs. It's also the Department of Energy, it's the investors as well. Really, it undermines the trust that particularly people, investors like ourselves, have in these projects and in the returns of these projects. So it's, you know, it comes down to where do we draw that line? First of all, if a line is going to be drawn, it needs to be agreeable by all parties and not just one. And secondly, you know, what is the risk of that line moving again? And that's the precedent that we're concerned about.
Turning to East Africa now, Uganda has been steadfast in its fight against the coronavirus pandemic. The government recently extended the lockdown initiated to slow down the spread of the virus. Currently, the number of confirmed cases in the country stands at 55, with 4 recovered cases. But people are still prone to diseases such as malaria, and that could affect the efforts by the health officials there. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar has more on that story.
Like every other country in the world, Uganda is taking precautionary measures aimed at curbing the spread of the novel coronavirus. The Ministry of Health kicked off the fumigation of markets around the capital, Kampala, in a bid to reduce the risks. Vendors have in recent times been seeking refuge in markets since the beginning of the lockdown to avoid infecting their loved ones.
Imagine if many people get malaria, the health system is already compromised, paying attention to COVID. So if we get malaria and a lot of malaria and we have two things to deal with, it becomes so difficult. So it is very important that other diseases right now are prevented. And our most common disease in Uganda is malaria. And you know it also presents similar to COVID with fevers. So we shall increase the number of people whom we have to screen for COVID. So for that reason, it is very important that malaria is controlled.
Markets are usually crowded places, making it easier for the virus to spread. However, this has come with its own set of challenges. Braving the cold has subjected the vendors to diseases such as malaria.
The risk which we had was, this announcement got some people when they're already in the market. When they said the curfew starts with the immediate effect. So most of the people here have been, especially the ladies, remained here. Some of them are coming from very far, where they could not actually move in order to get what they need. So even the beds, the bed sheets, the blankets which they would be having, they didn't have it at that time.
The extension of the lockdown has come with even more challenges.
The president asked us to sleep in the market for 2 weeks because it's not good to put our children's lives at risk. But now the lockdown has been extended and it has been harsh. We would cover ourselves with polythene bags when it rains and umbrellas, but the mosquitoes were too much, and we thank the government for the nets.
The fight against the coronavirus in African countries is riddled by many constricting challenges. For market vendors in Uganda, they hope that the government's proposed plan will propel them back to business and grant their families safety. Mohamed Abubakar, CGTN.
The Egyptian Planning Ministry has shrunk its projection of tourism revenues to $11 billion this fiscal year. That's down from $16 billion. COVID-19 has put the Egyptian tourism industry under the worst crisis in history. CGTN's Adel Makhroui with more.
From political instabilities to terrorism, the Egyptian tourism industry is used to frequent hits, but it has never seen the zero occupancy rates COVID-19 smashed over the country. With all hotels and touristic sites shut, the government is now expecting revenues to shrink by $5 billion this fiscal year.
We were expecting this year we would reach 16 or 17 billion US dollars. We only worked in January and February. No one can say when tourism will be back. It depends on a cure for coronavirus. I'm comforted with the Shine reservations coming in November. I think that $11 billion is even too big a figure to be achieved.
The government has given the entire tourism industry tax holiday and is waiving all utility bills. But with an estimated $1 billion of monthly losses, workers in tourism could suffer.
Tourism is facing dangerous challenges, the first of which is to preserve our manpower. We have 4.5 million people working in the industry. If each has a family, that's roughly 20 million Egyptians. In 2011, we made a grave mistake by letting them go. When tourism returned, we didn't have well-trained calibers, and we suffered.
To prevent that from happening, Ministry of Tourism is threatening to suspend licenses of companies resorting to layoffs. It's also pushing financial support to employees and workers from the Tourism Emergency Fund.
But what's next? The travel bans will definitely be lifted. So Egypt is planning a bundle of offers that will include access to its newest archaeological discoveries, many of which are yet to be revealed. The country will also depend greatly on its biggest attraction, the Grand Egyptian Museum. Adel Makhroui, CGTN, Cairo.
A survey shows that most major American companies with operations in China have no plans to leave or to move production to other parts of the country. The joint survey was conducted by the American Chambers of Commerce in Beijing and Shanghai, along with PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was conducted during the first half of March, targeting senior executives from firms that had global revenues of over $500 million. They covered sectors from healthcare to consumer goods. The American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai said the companies are planning adjustments to their strategies, but there is no evidence of a planned mass exodus as a result of COVID-19. Well, Wuhan may still be celebrating the end of its 76-day lockdown, but many businesses there will be paying the price for some time. The slow pace of consumption has worried some sectors. CGTN's Zhao Yunfei introduces us to one food company preparing to leave the city.
Escalator down. Stores closed. This Wuhan shopping center's emptiness is an effect of months of suspension due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Though Wuhan is unlocked, customer traffic in stores is not what it used to be. Food chain owner Jian Hongbo has a demo store in the mall. Now he has to keep it closed.
In the beginning, we thought this was just a crisis. Then we realized it was a life and death issue. We have never experienced a pandemic like this. We were not prepared, and we were so naive.
This mall at Optics Valley used to be a hot hangout for nearby college students who are still not back in school. Jian says there's no way his store can afford to reopen. But he introduces us to another merchant who has bravely decided to resume food service. It's Wang Hao's first day back at work, and he has only seen a few customers.
As long as people don't take off their masks, they can't get rid of their fear of the virus.
For Huang and Jian, they say the hardest part is not earning money, but that the public hasn't gotten back into the habit of eating out. Back at the office, this work zone has been empty for 3 months. Food chains heavily rely on logistics, so the central Chinese city of Wuhan is ideal. But due to the current economic situation, they are about to move their headquarters to another city, Zhengzhou. It's a tough decision, one that means they'll have to cut almost half their staff of 70.
We are very reluctant to do so. All of our business plans have been ruined. We may not reach our goals for the year.
Jian says he hopes the unexpected turbulence will make them strong. He says they will find chances to return to Wuhan when the market picks up. And he says it is just a matter of time. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Well, it is the big question for governments around the world. When is it safe to reopen the economy? With the COVID-19 vaccine still at best months away, the fear is that opening up too soon could bring new spikes and set things back even further. One tool that could help leaders decide is antibody testing. CGTN's Dan Williams reports.
Staff at this hospital in Chicago continues the frontline work of testing as the city battles the COVID-19 pandemic. The number of deaths from the virus is still on the rise in Chicago, which remains in lockdown. But here and across the US, there is talk of opening up the economy once again. One element that could be critical in order for that to happen is antibody testing.
Antibody testing is an exciting next step. It's going to help us understand who has had the virus, who's been exposed to the point where the immune system was triggered, and then who carries immunity.
One of the largest antibody studies is being carried out by Beaumont Health, the largest hospital system in Michigan. 38,000 of its employees will be tested, as well as thousands of additional physicians and affiliates.
Our healthcare teams, our frontline workers go to work every day trying to protect themselves, and we'd like to relieve some of that anxiety and let our doctors and our nurses and our respiratory therapists go to work with some understanding of if they've got immunity or not.
Tyler Swift is an employee of Beaumont Health. He had COVID-19 in February, but only knew for sure through the antibody test.
It felt to me a lot like a cold. It was very hard-hitting cold. I only found out that I had actually had COVID-19 because of the antibody test.
In recognition of the urgency, the US Food and Drug Administration relaxed rules for antibody tests. But some lab experts are concerned that's led to too many tests being used of varying quality.
We now have at least 90 tests on the market, and we don't know about the accuracy of their results. Having many inaccurate tests is worse than having no tests at all.
Despite those concerns, antibody testing programs should provide a much clearer picture as to how many people have been infected by the virus. It may also provide clues as to what proportion has immunity and even how long that immunity may last.
That information could then be used to inform governments as to when it would be possible to begin the process of opening up their economies.
We would hope that that would then translate more into the rest of our societies, and which people can get back into jobs where they may be exposed.
There is still a number of questions that need answering around COVID-19, not least whether a person can be reinfected and therefore carry and spread the virus. But as the race for the vaccine continues, the results of these antibody tests are likely to be critical, not just in the fight against the virus, but in determining when life can begin to get back to at least a sense of normality. Dan Williams, CGTN, Chicago.
And we have plenty of stories from the world of sports coming your way, including an alleged power struggle throws the South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee into turmoil.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee has been thrust into turmoil with fresh allegations that a veteran administrator, Nthambi Ravele, has been blocked from running for the top job at the organization. The decision is said to have been taken by acting president Barry Hendricks and Tennis South Africa's boss Gavin Crooks. As a result, SASCOC has launched an investigation, as CGTN's CS du Plessis now reports.
In a statement released on Wednesday night, SASCOC confirmed that acting president Barry Hendricks was being investigated for allegedly blocking an administrator from standing against him in the organization's upcoming elections. As a result, Hendricks has not been suspended, but has been asked to take a leave of absence pending the outcome of an internal investigation by the SASCOC judicial body. The allegations made by Tennis South Africa's board member Nthambi Ravele claim that her right to run for the top job at the organization had been dismissed and blocked by Hendricks and the TSA president, who both have denied the claims. But she has been adamant she has been prevented from running, and last month wrote to the Sports and Recreation Minister as well as the SASCOC board to express her concerns. So this is not a new development, but the decision to distance Hendricks from the board and staff at SASCOC certainly is. An independent advocate, Mr. Baloy Mere, has been appointed. As it stands, the SASCOC hot seat will be occupied by Athletics South Africa President Alex Kosana. He himself has ambitions to rise to the position on a permanent basis, but has been rejected in the past. So as to when the SASCOC elections eventually take place, time will only tell. They were initially planned for March 28th, but have been postponed indefinitely. This is yet another administrative blunder from an organization that continues to make the headlines for all the wrong reasons. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Now, the United States Anti-Doping Agency is taking steps to continue ensuring regulations against doping are maintained with new virtual testing measures for